Hello everyone and welcome to another episode of Discussing New Approaches in AI, Data and Technology. I am your host, Eric Walker-Rawson, founder at Talos Executive Search, and today I am joined by Suki, who is a geopolitical strategic intelligence analyst and advisor and fellow. Today we're tackling, massive topics, obviously the geopolitical state of the world when looking at technology and infrastructure and a whole host of other things. So I'm just going to get us straight into the topic and ask you, Suki, how are new advancements in AI and data and technology currently shaping the global geopolitical landscape? So nice and simple to start it off, I think.
Yeah, it is really complex, but also simple. Simple in the terms of technology is here. And people say, advances in technology. It's been here for a long time. It's just really a matter of what you consider an advance. So if you're looking at geopolitically, you have digital sovereignty, you have, or should I say data sovereignty, digital sovereignty, kind of the same thing. Infrastructure, I'd say infrastructure is the biggest one. We can talk about the whole military implications. We can talk about the what's going on with the world in advances of military integration, all that stuff. But the first and big one really is infrastructure. And I think that's the area that is very much lacking in a lot of places. Infrastructure, bureaucracy, the slowness of advances. I mean, if you're looking at, for instance, China's 15-year strategy, which is 2026 to 2040. Is that 15 years?
Yeah. Testing my math skills.
Excuse me, you and me both. But with their strategy, they really are focused on really making sure that their legacy infrastructure is really brought up to speed. And that's an area which is going to be for everybody in the world. And this is what I'm really wondering how countries are actually going to be making their systems more advanced because, the U.S. controls like 50% of the world's supply, I guess you could say, but not the resources. It's this weird. People always say, in different times, in new times, in moving times, whatever that phrase is, every day is different. This change is something that we're now seeing so much in real time. Before you would see it a couple months later, you'd be like, oh yeah, that changed. Now it's almost every day. I cannot keep up with the changes. I don't know anybody that's able to keep up with the changes that are happening in technology daily. You wake up and something you read yesterday is no longer valid today. It's absolutely wonderful, but scary.
Okay, so breaking all of that down, that was a lot of big statements. So I suppose, first of all, by infrastructure, because again, that's an all-encompassing word. Yeah. So what do we typically mean by infrastructure?
So we can start at the beginning of the supply chain. So if you're looking at just for your everyday person, infrastructure, your gas, your electric, your utilities. But when you look at that in a bigger perspective of, say, a city, you are talking about your grid, your telecom. So I always start out with explain it to your everyday person. The cloud is not a cloud. Your email, your data, it's not held up here in the cloud. The cloud is a building. That building has to be built on land. That land also now has to have electricity. It has to be cooled. It has to be heated. It has to be powered. It also needs to have water. Because as many people do not know, but they should understand, water is a resource that is not just important for us as humans and all the living things on this planet, but also for the things that we build and the things that we need to keep functioning. And that includes our technology.
And it seems that technology, including all of the infrastructure, is only consuming more water rather than less.
Yes. And it's not like we can just magically make water, although people think with weather seeding that you can, but there are repercussions for that because we don't exactly know what the long-term repercussions of using chemicals in order to make rain, actually, what's going to happen. But that's a whole other issue.
Yeah, that's a separate podcast issue entirely.
But the infrastructure, when you think of your everyday person not realizing that in order to just use your mobile phone or that's energy, that's water, that's infrastructure. You're looking at a country like England. People in London, we have 5G. Debatable as to where it is everywhere. But when you move further and further outside of London, especially when you're moving north, there are some places that don't even have 3G. And so that infrastructure needs to be more equal in order for any technological advances to really actually have an impact in a country. And you see those disparities around the world. You have countries that are huge, like China, and their infrastructure isn't great everywhere. But I got to say this, having lived in China 1 year, they have mobile reception in some of the wackiest places. You'd think that they don't have anything, and they do. And that's also because of their difference in their political systems. So, the government makes sure that everybody has access just because that's how they keep track of people.
Yeah. So I suppose there are benefits to the political system for both. But so again, that's a really interesting point. So what are the advantages and disadvantages of, I suppose, different types of infrastructure? So like comparing the infrastructure that China has, where it might not be more advanced technology, advanced or efficient, but more widespread, compared to more Western countries, us included. Correct me if I'm wrong. I'm definitely wrong on this, but we might have some of the oldest infrastructure that was built a long time ago. But now we're in a position where we've got a lot of really old Victorian infrastructure that doesn't really work properly, and we've either got to replace it or renew it in certain areas. So I suppose what are the benefits and disadvantages to both of those?
Yeah, so you can look at, say, the infrastructure when it comes to the rail system here in the UK, some of the oldest systems in the world. You look at the underground, and this is why we always have train faults on the line's not working, the line's down because leaves fell on it. I mean, look how long it took to get the Elizabeth line. And we still don't have really great train lines going from east to west in the UK. We get them going north to south, but not east to west. And that's just the infrastructure. One, you have to give up land. People don't want to give up land. There are a few things in this world that are really valuable: water and land. Your house, it sits on the land. The house really isn't of value. The land is of value. It's just one of those things. And when it comes down,
really weird example is just people who have, I think there are people who own really tiny patches of land where corporations want to build railways or roads. They can end up getting a lot of money for that patch of land because it's so valuable, and the legal implications of that. Really weird parallel to make, but it just shows how.
No, it's that's exactly the point, is that sometimes just that little trash of land is worth more than the house that sits on it. And unfortunately, I think a lot of people don't understand that in a country as small as the UK is, everybody likes to think we're huge. No, small. Small country. When you look at the infrastructure, the things that need to be built, people are going to have to give up space. They have to. I think one of the things that really pains me is that when you look at, say, solar panels on a house, the government incentives are there, but just to have your house go through that transformation, the implications: one, insurance companies, they have to agree when you want to put a solar panel on your house, whether or not it's going to actually pay off. One, the implications for them insuring that house. I was having a chat with one of my neighbors. It's unreal. It's unreal just to do something which would be long-term beneficial. It would take more power off of the grid and ultimately reduce the price. But no, they don't want to do that. They don't want to do that. But anyways, coming back to my point, which I completely forgot, was infrastructure. When we're looking at infrastructure, we're looking at water. So in order to use water in a data center, you need cooling, you need wastewater facilities. Wastewater facilities in the UK are limited. Wastewater facilities are needed for just about everything. We barely get through with Thames water right now. And wastewater facilities are needed for the runoff of technology production, chip building data centers. We don't have the manpower to build the data center. We don't have the educational capacity of the people that are needed to run a data center. So I'm struggling. A lot of people are struggling with the fact that we're getting this influx of money from Nvidia that's saying, oh, we're going to build this huge data center.
And that's part of the Stargate UK
Yeah, the
initiative.
Stargate. Yeah. And so who is going to build this? Where is it going to be built? They're saying it's going to be built here. Okay. Then you're looking at the offshoot of the pollution in that area. We already have problems with the water in this country. So wastewater facilities. I was checking to see who they were looking at to do the wastewater. I haven't seen that in any plans, like anybody talking about it. No one said, oh yeah, we're going to build a data center here and there's going to be a wastewater facility. I know there will be one, but nobody's speaking about that. And those are the infrastructure elements that should be highlighted. It should be about the safety and concerns of local residents, or else it's not going to happen. This is one of the issues. They put these big mega projects and they go, yeah, we're going to do this. And then people in those areas, those residents, get mad and they don't want it to happen. It gets stalled. And that's the bureaucracy. It gets stalled because you have people filing lawsuits. You have councillors, you have MPs going, oh no, we don't want this here. And then it doesn't happen.
I mean, what's your opinion on the sort of Stargate project, aside from obviously the residential elements? But like you said, it is lots of money. It's big American influence and obviously part of the wider, I suppose, OpenAI, Nvidia, US government AI boosts, I suppose, and infrastructure building, most importantly, I suppose, for multiple reasons.
One of the things that really scares me about technology is that you have a lot of power in a very small amount of people. Very small number of companies hold the majority of the power when it comes to technological advances. And that's where you get into sort of the geopolitical aspect of who's in charge in the world, who isn't in charge, who thinks they're in charge, and where power is actually held. And right now what we're seeing companies like Nvidia holding a large amount of the capacity but they don't actually hold the large amount. It's TMCS. TSMC, I can never remember what it's like DCMS, every year changing their initials. But yeah, they don't actually own the chip production.
Okay, so maybe break that down a little bit, because that's very interesting. So I think there's always this is almost breaking down misconceptions on how this stuff actually works. I suppose from a geopolitical angle now, because these tech companies are so large and complex, you almost have to apply the same level of analysis that you would maybe a country. I'm almost the sort of the weighing up of how much of a threat they are in certain areas. But I suppose, so how does that break down then if they don't actually?
It's the geopolitical power of the technology that Nvidia holds is actually just the country of Taiwan. So it's oh my gosh, I really probably should look this up, like the correct acronym. Is it TSMC? TSMC, I think it's TSMC. It's like the Taiwan Semiconductor something, blah, blah, blah. But they are actually the people that are the manufacturers of the chips.
Wow. Okay. So it's almost...
Which is one of the reasons why people are very much concerned about China and what China's doing in the Red Sea in and around Taiwan. That's why there is this big interplay between the US and China when it comes to Taiwan. It's not so much about Nvidia. Nvidia is the one that everybody's looking at, and they are important, but there's this little undercurrent of the people who actually have the power. The people, it's like if one of them falls, if that island goes, it's bad. It's bad for the whole world's production. But it's actually more TSMC than it is NVIDIA.
Maybe we shouldn't share this with the NVIDIA shareholders.
I won't tell people that. It's like...
So does that make Taiwan a very important country then on the geopolitical stage?
Yes, it does. But then when you're looking at Taiwan, you can't just look at Taiwan by itself. Because I said there is that whole supply chain. You have to look at where the world's resources are held, where all the rare earth minerals are. You know, people are not looking at Africa in the way that they should. That is one of the reasons why the Chinese have been there for the last 60 years, not just the last 30 years. People think it's recent. No, they've been there before you and I were born. They've been there, when my parents were kids, and they have been in Africa, in places where those minerals, they've been, unfortunately, in countries like the Congo, where we know about, cobalt. They have been there and they've been mining for a long time. Those are the resources that are needed in our supply chain. Those are the things that we need to build our mobile phones, to build our chips, to build our infrastructure, to build a building. Those are the factors that go into play. And people, unfortunately, value the end of the supply chain more than they do the actual beginning of the supply chain.
Is that a mistake to value the beginning of that supply chain? Because obviously where my head is going to in this is the value. You can value any part of that supply chain from an outside perspective, but in reality, the value of that supply chain doesn't change, if I'm making sense there. So the value of the beginning of that supply chain in Taiwan, even though everyone's focused on the end, Taiwan is still incredibly important. So is there a downside to focusing too much on the end goal, Nvidia in this case, and what they're doing on the market level and the economic level, rather than is it almost a weakness to not focus more on the beginning of that supply chain?
I think it is a weakness because the production of Nvidia won't happen if certain countries in the world have political unrest and have war. That's why, when there's a war or conflict in the Middle East, and it happened in like the 70s and 80s, while oil prices went up, because that's the beginning of the supply chain. People were like, why is the gas price? Why is my diesel more? And it was because there was war going on, which is why when we had the pandemic and we had the issue with the Suez Canal and ships couldn't get through, the prices were going up for things because it was a longer route for goods to get from China, which was producing all of those, consumer goods products, to get to Europe and to get to the UK in particular. And people don't realize that knock-on effect. So with companies like producing chips and semiconductors, it really comes down to, is there instability in Africa? Is there instability in those places in the world that produce those minerals for those chips? And that's where I think people seem to forget when they're valuing what's really important. They're not looking at, they're going, oh yeah, Nvidia stock, but something happens in the rest of the world. Nvidia is not producing anything. And I think governments understand that, large companies understand that, like the big multinationals, but the everyday person doesn't understand that knock-on effect and why it really affects them in their wallet. And I think more and more people are beginning to understand that now.
Because, if you look at economies on a base level, I always take the view that obviously economies are just a set of behavior. And so any set of behaviors in the world can affect the global economies, like you said, in wars. So I suppose when you've got Nvidia with its roots in Taiwan, and then you've got China eating up parts of the Red Sea, does that then create more conflict by these sort of conflicting interests And what does that mean, I suppose, for the geopolitical state of that region?
The complexity of that is that the Chinese play the long game. So everybody's trying to figure out what China's doing. And China is playing both sides. So they're saying we're not going to do anything with Taiwan. But we know long-stated mission is they want to be the global dominating force. And so Taiwan's part of that. So in order to capture that market dominance, they need Taiwan. Unless they can do what they want to do, which is they can basically reverse engineer the process and make chips as good as, if not better, than what Nvidia is doing. And that's possible. That's possible because as we see when it comes down to robotics, when it comes down to EVs, it comes down to batteries, they're surpassing. And the only difference is what they do is not deemed as socially, it's not deemed as aesthetically as good as, I don't mean just visually aesthetically, just sort of the mindset of people in adopting their products. One, because of the obvious implications of what is actually in that product and whether or not it's going to be surveilling you when you buy it. But you can't lie when you say that car, like a Chinese, I can forget the model, but a Chinese car that is an EV is better than a Western car that's an EV. They generally are. And that's what's really, it's, when you're looking at a phone from a Chinese manufacturer that shall remain nameless beginning with H, and you're looking at a phone that is, a Nokia phone, or even if you're looking at an iPhone, hands down, it's that Chinese model. One, maybe because they've taken everything that is from a Western model and integrated it into their model. It's a better phone. You cannot dispute that. It is a better phone. Unfortunately, it is what also is contained in that phone. And that's where people are looking at with the technology. You see a lot more, if you go on Instagram or wherever, you see a lot more people going from the US, from the UK, from Europe, and going to China and manufacturing their goods there, and then shipping them back to whatever the country is and using them because it's cheaper. But at the same time, they're not thinking about the other repercussions of doing that. You're worried about being surveilled when you're in your country, but you're not worried about the product that you're buying that is probably surveilling you. Not to, think about child labor that goes into, slavery. And we won't even talk about those aspects. But that exists in all supply chains, unfortunately. It's just a matter of where it's clearly seen and clearly viewed.
Especially when you get onto more sort of global supply chains, it just increases that exponentially. But I suppose it's definitely an interesting point. I think with China playing that dominance, you can see it in the robotics reveals most recently. The time of recording is sort of end of November or late November. And so they've just revealed some of those newer robotics models that have been doing the sort of stage shows. I think one of them even tricked the audience into thinking it was just a person in a suit. So they had to rip it open on stage.
Cut open the leg to show, and then they peeled off the head. Oh, yeah.
I suppose when it comes to sort of technological advancement, where are, I suppose, the key players at the moment? How do you see them on this world stage? And when it comes to strategies, what are their advantages and disadvantages? I suppose, we've touched upon China having the long game in mind, 15 years or more. I suppose linking to the art of war is sort of that's their strategic movement on the global chessboard. But I suppose what are some of the other players as well, and how do they interact?
Europe is dead in the water. It's with Europe, the issue is bureaucracy. And you can look at, for me, the example is the German efficiency model, the German engineering model, hands down some of the best. But the problem is it's become stagnant because of bureaucracy, because that need for making sure it's right. And then you have sort of the American mindset of, move fast and break, and that's really sort of impacted the way that technology advances. But there is also that thing which is within technology, especially within defense, you can't test it unless you actually have a war. You don't know. You can test it in perfect conditions and go, oh yeah, this is going to work. But unfortunately, war is real time. It's messy. People die. You do not know how people are going to react when a situation happens. You can test for perfect. You can test for perfect when it's using a laptop. You can test for perfect using a mobile phone. Those are areas where people are not going to be unduly stressed, high levels of, blood, sweat, bombs, whatever. But when you are testing anything in dual use or defense tech, that has to be 100%. You got to be able to use it in real time. And the only way in real time is a war. And that's what's happening when you see Ukraine and drones. The effectiveness of what they've done with drone technology, it has been fast because they're building for survival. They're not building for commercial profit. They're not building and going, oh yeah, we want to test this. They're going, we need to build this. And yeah, we'll test it. But at the same time, testing means using. They test it in a little area and then they go, okay, yeah, it works. Go. That's the difference. And I think maybe Europe, especially in Germany, they're starting to adopt that sort of mindset of going faster because they realize they're not just Germany, they're not just France. They are technically on a front line now. And I think they're slowly coming to realize that with what's going on with Ukraine. When you're looking at Ukraine, you're looking at what's going on with countries like Moldova. You're looking at what's going on in Poland. The Finns experience this every day. Finland has been dealing with incursions and everything in the Baltic Sea forever. They have been dealing with Russian penetration testing pretty much their whole existence. So, and if there is a country that I'd say people really should look towards, especially in sort of this northern hemisphere, it would be Finland. Their
thing that makes them, because obviously they've got the experience, like you said, of being on that front line. But what are, I suppose, the examples of things that they've adopted?
They start training kids early to understand about data, to understand about online security. Their citizens are all trained by the time they're 20 years old. They understand technology. And I think that's what's lacking in a lot of countries in the Western world, rest of the world. I think that's lacking. I think if you could integrate, and once again, comes down to infrastructure. And also political systems, because we don't have the same political system. So, yeah, it's one of those damned if you do, damned if you don't. It's really the acceptance level. I mean, we have people in the UK, they don't even want to do a digital ID. I have conflict with that. But at the same time, I can understand the opposite end. The conflict for me is who's controlling that data, who has control of that data, who's holding it. When I give you this data, where does it go? And that's the problem that I have with the whole idea of having children at a very young age understand about technology, because when they're in a classroom and they're learning, who's getting that information about that child?
So is that sort of the integration of like iPads and various things in the classroom
in
itself?
the classroom?
Yeah. They're learning behavioral analytics. They're learning influencing analytics. Like, where is that data being
At
held?
a very young age. And it's I did a talk a few years ago, and it's all connected. And you're seeing that now with people, we've seen it over the years, people being marketed based on, their postcode, where they went to school, how they're voting. It's what you're buying. You look at that and you're thinking, okay, there's only maybe 3 companies that are dealing with all of that data. And every time you go onto a website and you say, oh yeah, I don't consent. But you do actually consent because they have those hidden cookies that nobody really goes to legitimate interests. Yeah, people really should. And that's one thing I would say, go to legitimate interest, people. Go check that extra tab that says more information.
Yeah, or that I think the other way around is they started doing cookie trade-offs, so we won't do cookies if you do this thing. Or you will have cookies, you'll have the full cookie experience. So it's almost like a win-win for them, almost a sort of lose-lose for you either way.
It's like an emotional manipulation. Oh, this website won't work really well if you don't accept the cookies. And it's like, well, what does really well mean? What are the functions? Why would you do that? And I think it's it's the mindset of fear of missing out. And that's also what people and countries have done geopolitically with getting citizens to adopt technology in their countries. Said, well, you're not going to be part of society if you don't do this.
Do you think that's a move that benefits the population? Do you think it's a necessary evil now? You need to adopt your population within technology in order for them to be resistant to cybercrimes? I mean, because then I suppose the opposite side is, I know definitely heard something about government where they're moving to actually going back to paperless, back to paper, and going anti-digital by just having records and files. So we're almost taking a step back in order to be more secure in the sort of cyber attack world that we're coming into now.
What country was that? I did not see this. Maybe I need to move for a little bit. Just get out of this world. So when people are looking at cybersecurity, they're looking at just any sort of digital threats, I think people need to understand the biggest threat is not actually the technology, it's people. It's how people use technology. Any advances, when we're looking at just the way that you're marketed to, we're looking at AI hallucinations. It's people. It's not ever just a machine doing it randomly by itself. It starts with a person. Everything that has developed starts with a person. And yeah, it's gotten better because of the iterations that machines do. But ultimately, it's a person. And so when you're looking at security, you're looking at people wanting to use paper, it's because they don't really trust the person. Is that they can say they don't trust the machine, but ultimately you just don't trust another person. And I think people really need to remember that there is a person at the end of that. And I'm not really sure about the whole going completely back to paper, but I always think that I don't understand what coexist.
Yeah.
I really don't understand, because there is no way that you are going to be able to train and have every single person on the planet digital. It's not going to happen. Because in order for that to happen, it means that you have to have the infrastructure everywhere on the planet. And we already know there are civilizations, communities back in the deep Amazon that have never even gotten to the stage of wearing what we consider fully clothed. So how is that going to happen? And how long have they been existing like that? And we just think just because we've decided, like this in the last 100 years, that everybody should be industrialized.
I suppose it's a similar thing to colonialization, where these big empires are going dominate the rest of the world, and then imbue their sense of what a civilization is on the quote unquote natives, when actually it's, you could argue it's just a different point of view. I'm sure those tribes don't really care about all of these geopolitical things that are happening in the world, and do they need to, I suppose, is a question.
No.
Yeah, because it doesn't affect them. They're
No,
almost
just
sort of
like
opted out.
the construct of countries. Africa didn't exist how it is with the countries that it has now. 1884 or something like that is when, they just decided to split up these countries, which is why you do have wars. And I think that people really should pay attention to the fact and the reason why you have mass migrations of people moving around the world. And it's because they have been colonized, and it has been, oh, well, if you live here, you'll have this better way of life because we've done this. And you look at their countries and they don't have the infrastructure because while somebody went in there and colonized them, they didn't build the infrastructure. That's the danger with what's happening with China. And what it has done is that it's building infrastructure in places that were colonized by Western countries, but they just didn't really colonize them. They took basically the resources. They basically just went there and said, oh, I'll have that. Oh, I'll have that. And then went back to where they wanted and built whatever they wanted, but they didn't actually build infrastructure in those countries. And sometimes they did build infrastructure, and then when they left, they didn't maintain it because they didn't feel the need to maintain it. They took what they wanted and then they left. And then you have countries that are coming in and saying, okay, we'll build your infrastructure, but in return, we want this. It's very much the Chinese way of Guanxi, we'll do this and, you give us that. Whereas other countries have said, we're going to come and conquer you. We're taking that and we're not giving you anything in return. Oh, yeah. And by the way, you can come to our country and, but we're not going to help you there either.
So I suppose with the Chinese way of doing it, the Guanxi way, not that it's better or worse, but what are the differences, I suppose? Because it doesn't sound like it's any better of an alternative, because it sounds like it's just a longer way of taking things that they want. But so do they go in and build that infrastructure from the ground up? But how does that work, I suppose, in practice?
Yeah. So if you look at Jamaica, my family's homeland, the national highway in Jamaica was built by, it's a toll road. It was built by Chinese government. I can't remember when that was done, but that toll road, the toll fees still go to China. It doesn't go to Jamaica. The people that came to Jamaica and built that were Chinese workers. They came, they built the toll road. So Jamaica got a highway toll road, but they don't get the money. And I can't remember when that actually, they'll start to reap the benefit, but it won't be for a very long time. In Tobago, the sports stadium was built by a Chinese company. And they get to be in that country and reap the benefit. And that's what they've done. They've gone to different places that have been colonies, and that builds goodwill. That's the soft power. And that's what they've been doing. And I can't fault them. It's just a different way of doing what everybody else has done. The difference is they play the long game. I mean, come on, you look at China and people might think, oh my gosh, she loves China. I cannot fault the way that they have done things. It's just, I can fault the way that they treat people, but then I look back and I go, it's not like anybody ever treated people that look like me any better anywhere. So, and I think that's what's happening now. When you look at geopolitically, you're looking at countries in Africa, you're looking at African nation, you're looking at countries in the Caribbean and Latin America that are going, we gave the US and Europe a chance. yeah, we're going to give the Chinese a chance now. And that's basically the mindset of, well, you didn't do anything to help me. Look at what's happened to my country. Look at how it's in ruins. Look at how we're not progressing like everybody else. And we're going to look at these guys and they're going to help us. And yeah, we might have to give them something, but our countries will be built up. And so that's the mindset of developing nations now, is that, well, you weren't helping us. We're going to go to the people that are going to help us. And we might have to give something away, but it seems like a win for them. And I can't say whether it's good or bad or whatever, because when you're looking at China, having lived there, you go and live there, you are surveilled. You are watched. You know that everything you do is you're going to be held into account. And then you're living in a place like, I can't even say the US because that's just a whole different kettle of fish right now. But you're living in the UK or in the US and you're thinking, I'm in a free society. Are you? The difference is you're in a society where you are surveilled equally as much. You are just not, it's just not verbally stated all the time. In China, In China, in Taiwan, in Japan, you drop litter, you get fined, In China, you are being surveilled. You are aware of the system of surveillance. You are aware it's a different system of government. So because it is I can't even say, they're not really communists anymore. It's social communism. But because they have that system of government, you know exactly what you're walking into. And then when you are in a Western country, you think, it's a free society. Not very much anymore. You can't.
What's that sort of infrastructure of surveillance? So obviously it's very obvious in China to a degree, but are there commonalities between the two?
Well, yeah. We won't name certain companies, but we know who they are. So, for instance, when you're in the UK, if you're thinking, we'll look at just a few years ago, I would say maybe around 2017 or 18, I can't remember. In London, you have BT towers. They're little towers where you can connect to the internet.
Yeah.
So when that happened, people thought, that's really great. You can connect to the internet. That's another way of surveilling you, because that's how they caught drug dealers during the pandemic, because they would be going to those areas to use the internet. So it was kind of like, we're connecting. It's just a more subversive manner of surveillance. It's not, it helps with crime, but at the same time, I just think that people need to be more aware that structurally, you have an Oyster card, you have a debit card, you're tapping in and out when you get on public transportation. That is also connected to your existence. That's connected to your bank account with your debit card. When you're tapping in and out, people before thought, it's not telling me telling people where I'm going. Actually, yeah, it does. When you use your card or you use a club shopping card in a grocery store, that's also tracking what you're buying. You think, I'm getting points. You're getting points, but that's also connected to your debit card. It's also connected to that receipt transaction. That is tracking what you're doing, and people are not paying attention. Whereas in China, everyone goes, they're scanning your face, and every time you tap somewhere and you're using your WeChat and whatever, you're doing the exact same thing. It's just the difference is, instead of your government doing it here, it's a private company. In China, it's the government. And it might be a private company, that is essentially partly owned by the government.
Or invest into, or need to a lot of different
They're
companies,
basically like the seed investors for anything that gets done in China. And because it is a communist, socialist society, while the company may be making lots of profit, lots of money, you really still have to exist within that dynamic. You still have to be, I'd say, giving back to the state and making sure that what the state wants, the state is able to get. So, and the difference is when you look at companies here, it's all about giving back to the stakeholders, giving back to those that profit from your data, your information. And it's just a matter of weighing up which is the most comfortable for people. And,
what people will tolerate, I suppose.
There's a level of tolerance. And I think this is just one of those questions. It's like, how much can you truly own yourself and still function in society? And I think as we move further and further with more technological advances, as an everyday person, you own less and less. And
will you continue to own less and less as technology advances, which is sort of what you said there? But so you mentioned earlier the rate of technology and I suppose infrastructure and everything that's combined with that is rapidly increasing, has increased over the last couple of years, will continue to increase as it looks like. I suppose what's the causality for that, and what's the trade-off? It sounds like the trade-off is going to be more personal information, more of your life surveyed and documented, almost on both sides. So whether you're part of as an example, Chinese infrastructure, where it's more state monitor surveillance, or where it's more sort of corporation surveillance, as the technology level increases for both of them, you're going to be put under even more surveillance on both sides as companies gain more power, as the state gains more power. So I suppose what's the root cause of this? Is it just the nature of technology itself, or is it because of the economic strategies that are in play? I suppose it's probably hard to define, getting into sort of prophesizing about the future. But it'd be interesting to hear your thoughts on it.
It's I always think the world is a shade of gray. You can say there's wrong and there's right, but actually it depends on the perspective. There's good and there's bad. You might think, oh, well, people in the West think, oh my gosh, China, everything is wrong. And then everybody in China, oh, everything in the West is wrong. But it's not. It's not 100% on either side. It's a shade of gray. And that's the issue with technology. That's the issue with our data sovereignty. It's, okay, yes, I own me as a person, but in order for me to have a job or have money, I have to trade a part of what I know in order to get money. So I don't own that anymore. I've sold that to somebody and I've gotten money in return. And that's what's happening when you're looking at your data, your information. In order for you to exist in a society, you have to give that society something. And unfortunately, it seems that when you are giving something to your government now, you're not just giving it to your government. You're giving it to your government, and whoever behind the government is actually building that technology. And that's what's happening when you look at the NHS. Who's building that database that the NHS is going to be using to compile all of this information? Everybody, I think it's great if you can have all of these NHS trusts come together. I shouldn't have to go to my optician at Moorfields and then go to another place and then tell them, oh, I have an eye condition. It should be on a record. A medical record should include your full medical records. I should not have to explain these things to different people. It should be all there.
But it's because of the different data sets collecting all your information.
Yes, everything is siloed. And while that decentralization is great, as I said, shade of gray, it's also not so great. because that's why you have people having to run around here, there, and everywhere to get, one piece of information when they're going to have surgery. And when you think about it, shade of gray. Centralized, not so great either. Because, as I said, a very few amount of companies having power. So it's which one do you want? Which one do you consider which one bad or which one good? Paper good, no paper good. Which one is it? There is no wrong or right way. And I think that going forward, people need to reconcile and be aware of what they are giving, when they are giving it, what it's going to be used for. And that's the part, the transparency that's not existing right now, what that's going to be used for. People don't understand that when they do give that information, that there's a price that comes with that. And we're not being told what the price is.
It's almost bringing it back to the Finland example where it's not being told what the price is, but you can educate I suppose the youth of tomorrow, so they can do a better job, and so they are more technologically and digitally competent at navigating this more complex world. I suppose, are there examples of that you can think of where that, like Finland, where that has been, almost like tech for good, where you might see a little bit of hope on the horizon?
No, I think maybe today I'm a little bit more pessimistic than average. So thinking of places where there may be some positivity in the world. There are a lot of places, but I believe in India that because the population is also significant and because they build for survival versus building for commercial efforts, the majority of people, there is some hope when it comes down to how people are building technology.
So is that due to the system that India has, where there's I think it's called the caste system, where they have a greater population at the bottom end of the population, but obviously they're and also culturally, I think as well, from what I know, they're very educationally minded, so it's a very intelligent population that are, like you said, in survival mode and building sort of this technology. So I suppose, what does that technology look like that they're trying to build?
Yeah, I when it comes down to India, having gone there, 3 years ago, and seeing how they are taking young people from tier 3 cities, tier 2 cities, and training them. There's a company, it's a foundation called Deshpande Foundation, and they have a campus which is actually right down the street from Infosys headquarters, but not affiliated with Infosys, where they are training young people from the ages of 12, 13 to understand technology. They're teaching them English. They're helping them understand technology and training them. Those young people are living on a campus very much like a university campus. They also have an area which is for startups. They have another area which is where those startups, those companies, those young companies can build and develop their software. They had a company there that was testing for pickles, testing the internal structure of pickles, whether or not they were good or bad. And that company, that scale-up startup, was now supplying McDonald's with pickles in India. And that was to scan the pickles to make sure that they were good, and before they were hand sorting them. And you see those sorts of innovation in places in the world where it's not about building another phone or building an app because, you want to order more food or, whatever. Not that that's not important, but I somehow think we've already jumped the shark with how many are needed. And I do believe there are a lot more people thinking of how better to use the resources that they are able to access. And
So it's almost that the hope is sort of in the startup world. I mean, there's a lot of noise in the startup world because it's now easier than ever to start up. But it's, again, in India and other places, but people having ideas where again, it all comes down to the problem they're trying to solve rather than trying to build something with technology. You know, if you're setting out to build something with technology, it's probably the wrong angle. It's more, what's a problem I can solve with technology? I mean, for just a couple of people we've had on the podcast previously, using AI to help people who have PTSD in civilian and military populations, helping neurodiverse people with AI, neurosymbiotic AI to help people with Alzheimer's and Parkinson's complete their therapy, because it's using sort of two-way brain transmission with the help of AI to help them get into sort of flow states so they can finish it. So it's almost that start with the problem and fix that. So it's almost like you said, pockets everywhere of people trying to do good, but it doesn't necessarily get the same level of investment from.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's what's sexy right now is what gets the investment. And if you throw AI and say it's the AI of this, you're going to get investment. Whereas if it's something as simple as making sure that kids walking to school have a backpack that has a frame that converts to a table or to a chair, not so much. But it's very much a problem which, as I said, about infrastructure and supply chains, is something that helps those children at a young age develop, because then they don't develop back issues. And they're also being able to concentrate because they have some place to put their books, to rest themselves on, to sit, to have a mini desk so that they can write. And that then helps them when they're in that supply chain of becoming an adult, learn. And unfortunately, a lot of people don't look at the holistic aspect of becoming a person or just being in this world. They're very much siloed in their thinking, like, oh, well, this has to do with a technology supply chain. This has to do with a manufacturing supply chain. And they're not seeing how all of those things are connected, how a child's education, whether or not they have a backpack, whether or not they are able to concentrate when they're sitting, is actually as important as when you're developing your AI for manufacturing. You won't have a worker if that kid doesn't get there, and, I don't need a worker, I'll have a robot do it. You won't have somebody that will build that robot or understand that robot. And I always tell kids now, they're like, oh, yeah, I wouldn't know how to code. Oh, now they're saying, oh, well, coding, I don't need to know. I can do vibe coding. And then it's, I don't need to know how to do coding. What am I going to do? And it's like, be the person that can fix the machine. Because the machine is not going to be able to fix the machine. Mm-hmm. There is always a person at the beginning of everything. There will always be a person that will be needed.
That's interesting. I think there should be definitely more focus put on the younger generations, helping them prepare for this sort of post-AI, post-robotics world, but also I think it's traders and labourers and
trade
things.
Schools. There's the
massive opportunity for young people, I think.
In the UK, there's the IoTs, the Institutes of Technologies, and I think there's 7 around the country, and they teach young people electronics. They teach basically all of what's considered the hard technical skills, and it's incredible because while they are teaching them about technology, but they're also, those kids understand how to run wire. They understand the electronic components. They're not just systems engineers that go to your house to work for British Gas or whatever and fix something. They actually know how to fix it, not just to go in and hook up with the system computer and go, oh, well, it's telling me this. They actually know how to fix it. And that's what's really important. I always think I started out in chemical engineering, and it was electroplating. So all of the nice shiny things you see on airplanes or on Harley Davidsons, those are the things I used to metal finish. And I always explain to people that the skill of an engineer is not just about programming. It's not just about being a developer. It's also about the hard engineering skills, which is making sure that a building, along with architects, is constructed, making sure that those engineers that are working with concrete, all of those skills are very much relevant.
And infrastructure, like you said, infrastructure.
It's the hard sciences, it's the hard skills, it's the hard tech. It is knowing how to build a data center. You need the people that know how to build the data center. Computer can only do so much. A machine can only do so much. Person needs to oversee it. Person needs to know how to fix it when something goes wrong, because it's not always another machine that can fix it. They had a humanoid walk out, but another humanoid didn't cut open the humanoid's leg. It's just people are very much, oh my gosh, it's so great. Oh my gosh, all that glitters. And they don't realize that, all that glitters is gold, but there's minutia involved. You can look at a strategic big picture, but at the same time, there are the tactical things. There's the macro and there's the micro. And
you can almost see that in America at the moment. They're trying to push on the AI stuff, but obviously they've realized that they've outsourced a lot of their infrastructure to China.
Exactly.
And China is now the manufacturing capital of the world, which you can then see in the knock-on effects of the tariffs, control of some way of that relationship, which is an interesting way of doing it, but we won't get into that. But I think the not with the little time we have left. But I think the point is that they, again, it's almost like America's trying to catch up, and now that it seems like with Stargate, bringing it back to what we said before, it's like they're outsourcing infrastructure building to other Western countries to help them really combat what is happening in China, where they already have the infrastructure and they have already been doing this for a long time. I suppose to round off then, going a little bit off book.
Well, but just to continue on with the point that we're making, that's the problem here in the UK also. The UK is, for all intents and purposes, a service country. We don't build as much as we used to. And that is because, one, the lack of people that can do it, and the lack of infrastructure. We have very few companies left in the UK that manufacture anything. And most of those are not British owned anymore. And it's the big problem. It's the big problem with most of Western Europe, is that it's outsourced, except for countries like Germany, which it really irks me that they are so bogged down with their bureaucracy, because the talent they have there, just the schooling system, that's now become a little bit more stagnant.
So again, you've got to look at all stages of the supply chain of how you build this in a country in order to remain a competitive player, because any one of those cogs in that sort of strategic framework of how countries work doesn't work anymore. I suppose in the last 5 minutes then, what are the things that you are most afraid of? So almost countering the good side, bringing it back to the negative. What are the things that you are most afraid of moving forward, of where we are now, end of 2025, moving into the next 5 years, up to 2030? What do you think are the biggest risks to, I suppose, the geopolitical safety of the world, the global geopolitical
there's always
safety?
War.
Yes.
There's always outright war. But I think, I won't even say I think. That's the wrong phrase to use. It's my opinion. It's my opinion that apathy is my biggest fear. The apathy of the collective masses. Apathy and general acceptance of bad things. Just people saying, well, this doesn't affect me, so I don't care. I just want to have my everyday life. As long as I'm taking care of me and my family, I don't care. That for me is my biggest fear. Because if you have one person doing that, okay. But when you have a collective mass doing that, that's not good. And my other biggest fear is the fact that when you have a lot of people that have that apathy. You have a lot of people that step away from being engaged in how society moves and how we treat each other. And that's how we have now the seeds that have been sown in discontent amongst different populations and how we've become more divided. The whole divide and conquer, it's been working really well in a lot of societies of late. And that's really my biggest fear. It's not so much about the technology, because I really do feel that once people...
Or is technology an enhancer to this division?
It's an enhancer. It's made it happen faster. It's made it easier for people to be divided, because people are being manipulated by what they see, by what they hear, by what they think they're seeing, by what they perceive they're seeing. But as we know, with technology, with the advances of manipulation, that visually, it's pretty much you have to actually physically be able to speak with somebody and to touch them and to hear the words coming out of their mouth in the same room.
Yeah, even we could
to
be fake.
Believe. Exactly. Yeah. And that's probably, that feeds into that fear, is that apathy, that distrust, that divisive.
Would you say the wars now are being fought internally within countries, and really where obviously we have real life wars happening at the same time, Ukraine, Israel, Palestine happening at the moment, but at the same time where we're seeing border wars and things like that, but where a lot of this is engaging in is in almost sort of what you might describe as the heart of countries, where we know that there's Russian interference in elections, and you have general manipulation of populations on social media, which then creates division. So it's almost sort of strategic manipulation, strategic attacking of populations, so that they, if you get a population to collapse in on itself, you don't even have to invade them. You don't even have to sort of
exactly. Yeah, it's the divide and fall, and what really I've so much stuff in my head, and it's the constant. You're constantly grappling with the fact that for those that are living in, I hate the terms first world, but it explains it. But those people that are living in first world, not even democracies, but if you're the biggest fight and the biggest struggle is not actually for a lot of those countries that are not at war, that are not having any sort of external conflict with another country. It's actually the war is within the people. It's not so much you having conflict with another. It's the actual person. It's whether or not that person has the awareness, the knowledge to actually understand what information they're getting, whether or not it goes into this box of that's true, that's false, that's facts, that's not facts. That is just something being fed to me because it's been designed that way. It's about that person-to-person awareness. And then countries in the rest of a world where there are actual physical wars going on, those things are not really as relevant to those people because they're now just fighting for basic survival. So there's this disconnect, and that's where we are very much divided on the planet. And there are people that are actually physically fighting for survival. So they don't care if you've got some AI, that's spinning you a story about, this person over here, I don't know, doing something online that just looks silly. They don't care because they have somebody shooting at them.
It only matters up until the point of something real happening, which
exactly
is almost, I suppose, the next step, because it's internal division, civil war, you might call it,
and that's
it weakens countries to
exactly, and it weakens the population to the fact where they're willing to accept more and more radical things along the way because they think it doesn't affect them. And we're seeing that right now with just how people go, oh, well, it doesn't bother me. But
It will be.
yeah, I don't mind. I don't mind if my face is captured, facial recognition. Oh yeah, I'm not doing anything wrong. But as we see, as clearly demonstrated in the US, you have now actual companies that have made technology to capture immigrants or whatever, illegal migrants, whatever you want to call people, which is clearly probably wrong because it is capturing people that are citizens and saying, you know what? Yeah, you've done nothing wrong, but just because you were born in another country and you've done nothing wrong, we're going to kick you out.
So I suppose the big call to action there to finish off the show is don't be apathetic. It's be a part of the
you have to be
discourse.
I always say, awareness, advocacy, and action. And the first step is being aware. And it is, you can have two competing thoughts in your head at one time. And this is, I think, a lot of people don't like that.
Yeah.
They don't like to have conflicting thoughts. They don't like to question their own beliefs. And that's also one of the effects with AI that I'm worried about is just subjectivity. It's subjectivity and objectivity. People are losing that. They're losing that ability to actually question something. It's, constantly going to be feeding in that wheel like, oh, well, Claude or ChatGPT told me this, so it must be true. So then, you take that piece of information and you feed it back in to say, well, oh yeah, I heard this. And you feed it in again and it just continues until eventually it becomes fact to some person.
Yeah.
And that's what worries me is that there are people that are just taking the information that they found via AI or via some tech and just accepting it. They're not questioning it.
Yeah, which again, I suppose another call to action is question. Apathy, yeah.
Apathy. They just automatically accept what's given to them, and it is. And as an analyst, that is
terrifying.
That's terrifying. But it's not what we do. It is not what we do. We question everything. We even question our own analysis with like, oh, well, this is the information that I got. And this is, based on what I understand of the situation. And then we look at it and we go, yeah, we have this thing, structured analysis of competing hypotheses.
Yeah.
And
I mean,
it exists.
We could go on about this for a long time, I think. But that is all the time that we have for today. So I want to say a big thank you for everyone tuning in. Follow Suki. She's regularly speaking at loads of different events. You can follow her on LinkedIn. I'll put some more links below. Maybe some of those where they want to go and maybe advocacy and how you can learn more about all of this stuff to become less apathetic. But thank you everyone for tuning in again. If you have any more questions, put them down in the comments below. Love to continue the conversation. Maybe even take some of those comments and have Suki answer them and even come back. I mean, we could do this again in a year's time and everything will have changed again.
Exactly.
Yeah. But goodbye for now.
Channels.